keep a record of it. Okay, I'm going to call this work session to order at 10:35 a.m. And present we have Vice Chair Lauren Lehman, Member V. Treadwell, and Member Katie Nolan, and Member Lisa Torkelson, I believe, is not available to us
Correct.
today. Is that correct? And we still have a vacancy for the fifth spot.
Correct.
Okay.
And then Liz Edwards, Deputy Election Administrator.
And William Northrop, Election Administrator.
Do you anticipate anybody else?
Nope.
From staff?
Just us.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We will have a work session on ballot curing. Okay. Is there anything that you want to say and talk about that to sort of lead us into this discussion? And I know we have this.
Yeah, so why don't we take up this email that Meade sent to myself and Jamie on May 30th, and we can discuss that, and then we can talk about other things that were discussed in previous meetings, and any ideas that you may have on what could help solve the curing numbers, as well as some of the stuff that I've looked into and what we are going to be looking into for the next election.
Okay. Well, I'll just say, from my standpoint, I'm concerned about the fairly large number of disqualified ballots. I mean, every election cycle we've dealt with, it's a number bigger than I would like it to be. Mm-hmm. And you know, and I don't recognize every voter in the municipality, but I've recognized voters that I go, oh, those are upstanding people in our community who are engaged, and they may or may not vote the way I think is proper, but they're participating, mm-hmm. and that's what I want. And we've had to, for various reasons, on many of those, disqualify. And you know, and of course there's rules to go by, but that troubles me as well. That, you know, and so I want to continue to fix that as much as possible. And I recognize that people have the ability to come here and cure. Mm-hmm. And I have a very good friend who's voted probably in every election for the last 50 years, I'm guessing. And he was somewhat upset because his signature didn't match this last cycle. And I just told him, I said, well, get a grip, go down and cure, and just be glad that there's a process in place to protect. And he did. And he said everybody treated him fine. It took just a minute. You know, it wasn't a real big deal, but we do have that process. But it's possible, and in reading this, that older voters may give up mm-hmm. more easily and not want to come down. And if we have a record of a signature that we can get, then to me, it makes sense to get that and help cure before we have to put them through that process. Mm-hmm. So, anyway. Mr. Treadwell, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I would say this. Discussion, you know, as we went through this, I had a couple of discussions with the Lieutenant Governor, who, admittedly, I've never known a Lieutenant Governor who's versed on every election issue because they're all so complex, but they're all very well versed on policy issues. And she had never really thought about the signature issue because in the statewide elections she administers, she doesn't have to worry about the signature. In fact, she sent me back an email saying that we're not even sure we do the signatures, but why don't you talk to Carol? I had a nice long conversation with Carol, and Carol, there are several things on the voter registration management system that I think it's important that this municipality, or all the municipalities who are doing mail-in elections, and occasionally the state, as we saw during COVID, does its own mail-in election, that you've got a better voter registration management system because cities and the state rely on it. One is that if, and so my suggestion would be if a signature is missing, the voter needs to know, because frankly, a registered voter, it is, to me, immoral for a government to disenfranchise you if it's lost your signature. Okay, it may want to ask you to cure for a future election and so forth, but to say that somebody can't vote because we lost your signature, and you did approve opening some of those ballots. So we've taken that position, but I think we should also take the responsible position is to figure out how many of our voters in the run a match between our voter list and the signature list and say how many don't we have, and send a postcard saying we're going to send this to you before the next election, so that we get signatures there and work with the state to have them on the VMRS, because sometimes people move from our jurisdiction to others. The second issue on the VMRS or VRMS was, and this was something that I worked on when I was lieutenant governor, but they have now, I just got a note from GCI saying they're going to charge me $24 a year to send me paper bills. Okay, and I like paper bills because I like to be able to go through files rather than to coordinate, 12 emails, with bills on them and so forth. And the fact is that the state and the city do communicate with people. We do give people a way to sign up to get this. But the cure process is, again, a catch-22. If we find that a ballot needs curing, there's almost no time to cure it. And frankly, if it goes by mail, and the way people work with mail these days is, there's some days I won't even go to my mailbox, which is in my garage, for 3 or 4 days because it's almost all bills or flyers. And the point is, if I got an email or a text telling me that my ballot needs to be cured, I'd be more likely to do that. And in some cases, it may well be curable by phone. It may be curable where you could just say, hey, text us a picture or email us a picture of your driver's license with your current signature or something like that. So anyway, I think we need to look at the VRMS and insist upon, even though it's a confidential thing and emails change and so forth, that we get email and a text number if we have it, and that we do curing by that manner as well as direct mail.
Okay, so if I may speak to some of that. So if somebody does send in a ballot that the signature doesn't match or we don't have on file, we do send out a letter. We have to do that within 3 days of processing that ballot or running it through our sorter. They'll receive that letter, and that letter gives them multiple options on how to cure. That being either send a letter back to us, they can call us or come in person, or email us. They can use text to cure, which is that they do take the picture of the ID and send that back. We also call and email if they provide the emails. We will be, for this next election, calling.
How do they provide the emails, and where does that go?
Yeah, so they provide the emails on their ballot. So on the back, the return envelope. So let me grab one.
No, I know what you're
Okay, so on the back where the signature portion is, it asks, it's an optional, because some people don't like to provide that information, but they can provide us their phone number and or email on the back. And then if we have that information, we will reach out. We will be leaving messages on every single phone number that we have next election. I will mandate that. Same with emails. I mean, the emails were done regardless, but that will be done. I would like to have a conversation with the state, because I've heard two different stories here. I've heard that they do have emails and phone numbers, but I also hear that they don't. So I would like to get to the bottom of that, because if we can receive that information, I don't know if it'll be out of date or not. But that way we could move forward with contacting more people if they don't provide that information on the back of the ballot. However, I do have concerns about that because typically when somebody provides us their contact information, they are in a sense opting in for us to call them. So I would be concerned if we took someone's email from the voter database and then just randomly contacted them if they didn't provide us their contact information on the back of their ballot return envelope. Maybe this is an unfounded concern, but my concern is they're not, quote unquote, opting in to a phone call, email, or a text if that's something that we can do. It's kind of similar to the whole, I don't know if you guys get bombarded with political ads. It's kind of the same thing. I get bombarded with so many ads. It's like, I didn't sign up for any of these. Like, what's going on here? And I would hate to have voters in the municipality feel that if we're just randomly messaging them if they didn't give us their contact information. But I'd be more than willing to look into the state and have a conversation with maybe starting with Jeff here in Division 2 or going straight to Carol and being like, hey, is this information available? How do we get it? Can we, have it? So I'd be more than happy to have that conversation because I would like to know if it exists or not.
So Bill, can we just interact on this?
Yeah.
I think you need to look at the source data for voter applications. And right now, if it's with your PFD, the PFD definitely has an email. If it is a fishing license or whatever, they definitely have an email. I don't know how many Alaskans are registered on My Alaska, but My Alaska has an email.
Okay.
The state has all this, and there's if a political campaign comes and buys information about a registered voter, I don't know that we give out the birth date, we give out the address, because and I know some judges don't want their address to be known, but frankly, it's my right as an elector or as a candidate to know somebody's address, and so I don't know how we've worked around that issue. But emails are there. And frankly, the emails are collected at the time so that the government can be in faster touch with you.
Okay.
And we ought to use it.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Likewise, text things. And maybe you want to change the form to say email in case there's a problem with this ballot. Okay? And even say last year we had to reject over 1,000 ballots for absence of email or something like that. Just to encourage people to give you that, and then just make sure that the lawyers tell you how to protect it. And you're a good lawyer yourself, but you know what I mean. In terms of the privacy thing, but it is a fiction to ourselves that is a fraud for us to think that 3 days after receiving a mail-in ballot, that could be up to 10 days after the election. So that's 13 days to get something back to somebody, usually to the wrong address, because if it's 10 days late, they were overseas or something, to cure it on a process where the reason why the ballot doesn't work in the first place is because the government databases are bad and we haven't told people that their signatures in there. So that's that's my point.
And if we can gather that information, I would be more than happy to figure out a way to reach out to voters who don't have something on file that we can look at. As you were mentioning.
Can I touch on that for a minute? So when we get signatures, I get signatures 4 days before ballots get mailed out. So I don't have the processing time to go through a million. I have to.
Then it is immoral, in my opinion, to rely on signatures as something to disqualify somebody from a ballot. I hear what you're saying, but let's take this year's bunch from this thing, and if it tells us that we don't have, and just run a simple match, do we have a signature on
right? And I'm hearing what you're saying, but you wanted to do a postcard, and we just don't have the time frame. I mean, I get them 4 days.
Hold these elections. It is much less expensive to hold these elections than your in-person ones. If you don't have the money and the time and the staff to do it, then let's go to the assembly and tell them that they are running a fraud, because they are running a fraud.
Okay.
Okay? Let's fix it. Do
And
not give me a bureaucratic answer. We got to find the resources.
Okay.
We're just
but
giving-
we have to work within what we're given.
Mm-hmm.
So
The commission
code
is here to get you what you need. That's the difference, okay?
I understand that, Commissioner. I'm just saying, unless the assembly changes it, this is what we have to
If
work
you're not as
with.
angry about this as I am, I don't understand. You've just told 1,000 people that their votes don't matter because our database is screwed up, not because they did anything wrong. That is a fraud on the public.
We are actually building our own signature database so that we can have, if they cure it, it's now going to be in our system. It's not going to be in the states necessarily, but it'll be in our system. So we've pulled the previous elections going back to 2020, and we are working to build our own so that we get the cured ones. So even if it doesn't match what the state gives us, they've already done the work to say, this is me. So now that will be a new signature, a reference signature for them.
We have been lucky that we have not had an election that has turned on less than 1%. Okay? We've been very lucky. There have been many elections in my history in Alaska that have turned on less than 1%. Last night's preliminary ballots showed that there's if primaries mattered anymore, which they don't, you've got several that are within less than a percentage point. As soon as that happens, you will be sued and your process will be found unconstitutional. The Justice Department will be all over you. You will have disqualified voters on something that doesn't work. This is a big problem. Okay. Now I hear what you're saying, but I don't hear the fervent issue that this is an emergency. It is an emergency. Okay. The kind of numbers that we threw people out for, none of these votes happened. As I voted to support you throwing these guys out, I didn't raise a big fuss because it wasn't going to affect the outcome of any of the elections except for people who want to know how well they did, which is their right, okay, or how well a candidate did. But the fact is that if it gets to, say, control of the assembly or control of the mayors or the control of there will be lawsuits about this all over the place. You have a giant gaping hole. Okay?
So we hear what you're saying. And obviously we are concerned that this is an issue, and we are looking into other ways of trying to address this. We do have certain timeframes we need to work with and to make these elections work. We can look into working with the state to see if there is options that we can look into now for trying to gather that information or trying to figure out which voters do not have signatures now. We can't do it during the election because there's such a finite time to make everything work. If we had more staff, great, maybe, but there's 4 of us. Again, I am more than happy to have a conversation with Jeff or Carol to be like, hey, here are a list of voters that we don't have signatures for. Or, well, actually, no. So now I think we're confining two different things. We've got the signatures that don't exist, and we got the signatures that don't match. 2 separate things. So with our database that we are building, we are hoping to be able to address the issue of those non-matching signatures, which is the higher number than the one that don't exist. Arguably, the ones that don't exist could also be individuals who just moved to the state of Alaska, have not gotten a driver's license, have not filed for PFD, have not done anything that would get their signature in the database. I was one of those people when I moved here in 2020. Not saying that's the case, but I'm saying that could be a situation with, I think, how many did we have? 4 maybe that didn't have signatures?
Yeah.
So with our database, we are hoping that we can correct those signatures that don't match. People's signatures change. I have talked to multiple people that have multiple signatures. My signature on my ID is garbage. I use that as an example every time I'm talking to voters and every time I'm talking to the media. So, again, we're hopeful that our database will fix some of that issue. Another thing that I am going to be doing for this election is I'm going to be utilizing our ballot track system in a way to also hope to capture some of those cures that need to come in. So currently with our ballot track system, when ballots get mailed out, voters who sign up get alerted that their ballot has been mailed. They'll get a second alert saying that we received the ballot here. And then they'll get a third alert either saying that your ballot has been counted or there's an issue. For the ones that there's an issue, I have already talked to ballot tracks about potentially adding a fourth text to those individuals being like, hey, you need to cure your ballot. Here's your reminder. Here are your options to cure. That is a conversation that I am looking to have further with ballot tracks, but I know they can do it. So that will help a lot there as well. I also went heavy on messaging during the runoff about curing. So Allie, who works in the assembly branch for communications, pitched a story to every single major media outlet about the curing issue. I talked to, I believe, every single major outlet about it, and they published a story. The issue that we ran into during the mayoral, and I mean, it's unfortunate this happened, but a lot of people were like, oh, the candidate already declared that they won. So I was like, great, doesn't matter. Cure your ballots. It helps. Also, it changes, well, it doesn't change, but it will give you an updated signature in the database. So there are things that we are trying to do and will continue doing to ensure that these numbers come down. They have come down from past elections. I think the reason the state doesn't have this issue is because they have the witness signature. It's my understanding that in order, especially if you're voting either absentee or during that one time they had a vote by mail, you had to have a witness, which also there's issues with that because not everyone has a witness, especially during COVID when people were locked at home and stuff like that.
The other thing is witnesses are totally unverifiable.
That too. So that's what the state does. We could look into potentially, I mean, this would have to go through the assembly and you'd have to bring this to the assembly if you wanted it changed. But that could be something that could be done here. It would create a lot of confusion because there's already confusion about it, but that is something that could be done too as another way to ensure that these voters are who they are. Not saying that they're not, but there are, bad actors out there. I had to send 4 ballots to APD about this.
I get that. So let's go to your 2 categories, signatures that don't match versus signatures that don't exist. How many signatures don't exist of your, have you run that number of signatures where you've got a signature versus an elected registered voter? How many signatures are you lacking that are people who were required to come vote with an ID the first time who need to know that too?
I think there was 4 for the runoff.
Yeah, I think so.
So we had 4 for the runoff who you approved to be counted.
Correct.
Out of
I think there was 7 overall.
7 overall, and
Yeah.
that must mean the other 3 came in and gave us something.
Yeah.
So that's a smaller number compared to the signatures that don't match. Mm-hmm. So we could probably go to
Yeah.
this is hypothetical. We could maybe go to the state and be like, hey, can you run the people in your system to show us who doesn't have a signature? I don't know if that's something they can do. They're the ones with the control over the database, not us.
Yeah,
But-
and those voters that need to bring in their ID are sent instructions specifically stating, we don't have a copy of your ID. You need to provide a copy of your ID. The state of Alaska does not have it on file. So they do get special instructions that are spelled out for them that they need to provide a copy of their ID.
And they can either do that through the mail with their ballot, or they can go to a vote center.
Yeah.
A copy of their ID or a copy of their ID with signature. probably every ID has signature, correct? Every government issued ID.
Yeah, it gives it's copied from state statute, what is considered a
Okay.
ID.
So the ID is just verifying they are who they say
There's a
they are.
signature.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's
But,
So, but I'm-
it
signature on
also,
this
but
one.
it gets
Oh, yeah,
you,
there is.
by doing that, it gets you the
They don't
signature.
have a copy.
Yes. Yes.
And then it goes into our system.
Yes, and then it goes into that. So they are notified. We do send instructions.
We send we send instructions to people who are lacking the IDs, and even overseas military get the same
Yes.
instructions.
Yes.
So it's interesting. These are provided by customs, and there's a signature on something that will get me past the customs line in Korea, but not here. And something that gets me past the customs line here, but doesn't have my signature. My perennial fish and game license has my signature, but the government doesn't have it. I just am supposed to sign it. And then the driver's license, brand new, 2 weeks old, has got the signature.
So my messaging for these instances are always your driver's license, because that is something, either that or a state ID. Those are the two things that everyone should have. Not everyone's going to have a fishing license. Not everyone's going to have other forms of ID, but those two are the ones I always message.
So, Bill, can we restate the question and ask her? There's 2 pieces of information that would help us try to solve this now in a time. And Liz, I'm really trying to plan all over you for not doing this during the election. Ahead of the election, if we can, right now, just look at our database. What do we have? 300,000 people who are registered to vote in Anchorage.
Something like that. No, 200 and
240,000-ish.
Yeah, if we can run 240 versus the signature thing and say how many spit out no signature, okay? Then if we can go back, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be more than 4. It's probably going to be 400 or something like that. Let's try to cure that ahead of time.
Yeah.
The second thing is if we can look at the last, say, we've had, 5 elections since I've been on this commission. I think it's 5. 5 now.
There's been like 11 or so in total, 11 or 12 vote by mail in total, but yep.
If we can kind of run the thing of gee, how many people are serial non-curers, so to speak, and say, hey, we're writing you this, for whatever reason, a signature missing, or or the signature not match, and urge them to get a signature, come by or send us your state ID, or, frankly, if there's a state ID, and something happened in the state database, the elections people at the state level don't care about this because it's not mandatory for anything that they have. In fact, they weren't even sure where it is in their VRMS system. I don't know when they send you a database what it's coming from.
I don't know. They don't tell me.
Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile to figure it out. So,
Yeah. And
Yeah, and we know that most of them, we're assuming it's coming from the DMV because it's on a pad, and people we call it the car signature, where you just put your little squiggles.
which is awful.
Yep.
Right, and that's what prompted us almost 2 years ago to start building our own database so that we can capture when people are doing the careful, official document, so that it is a better match.
Well, the other thing is that you probably have a document in the city recorder's office for any time Lauren has bought a piece of property or sold it. You probably have one on there may be more available, and I'm not saying
but most of those are coming from the state. So unfortunately, we don't have that readily available. We have to go to the state for those, to the recorder's office, PFD. Those are all state entities.
Question. I share a polling location. I had a 21-hour day yesterday, so if I'm a little bit off, it's okay. Every single person that voted at South High yesterday signed either a register or a question ballot why can't we work with the state and access those signatures? Those are our voters.
Yeah.
They'll
So.
do the same thing in November.
Mhm.
Is it possible to access those signatures? They're there, they exist.
Yeah, that would be a question for the state of what do they do with them?
And I can have that conversation.
Yeah, I know when we moved to vote by mail, we did use they did give us the poll books, but most of the signatures we get are the electronic, which is why I'm assuming it's the DMV.
These are all everybody has.
Yeah, so we can.
Yep,
ask
I
the
can reach
state.
out.
Mhm.
And they're all in black ink, very far.
So when you got those poll books, did you scan them and
Yes.
put them in? Okay. Well,
There's another weird thing, which is you can't say to the voter, here's the signature we have on file for you, because that invites fraud.
We do encourage people to come down. We'll print it out for them and we'll show them at front. And we've had some people take us up on that, and then they go, "Oh man, I get it now." So when people do call asking what it looks like, we invite, come on down. We'll show you. So we do have that option, and we have had people take us up on that.
if I came, if I came and said, I'd like to see the signatures you have, and then I said, why don't we delete some of those because I never signed like this, would you do that, or you would keep all the signatures that are in there?
So, do you want me to?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay. Sorry.
You know more about the database.
Yeah. So at this point in time, we're not able to delete because right now we don't have the full database up and running yet. We're in kind of getting to the end of that, and so we get new rounds of signatures every election from the state, and it's really whatever they have in their file. So I'm not able to delete that. Hopefully, moving forward, once we do roll out our database, I do have the ability to go in.
But the question,
You might have a signature of mine from the 4th grade, for example. I've been around Alaska for a long time.
And with our new database, what we're doing is we're actually going to keep adding, so it takes out the older ones. So it'll make the more recent ones first.
I'd urge you not to do that. I'd urge you to have the date of when it was acquired.
Yes, we do. But as far as like when in the system, when they see
So
it.
you would throw somebody out?
No, it's not throwing out. It moves the recent one up to, they can scroll and see all of them, but you see the more recent ones at the top.
I just went through my mom's last 20 years of her life and watched her signature go from what it looked like in high school to what it looked like in elementary school to what it looked like in preschool. All right. So it may not be a bad thing to hold on to it, but okay. Well, the specific suggestion here is that I really think we need to analyze of the ones that we threw out. If we threw them out, why was the signature? What signature didn't match, and let the voter know that there were hundreds of them, and give them that opportunity again one more time between now and election. Send us and if it's on their state ID, where you've got examples of something that didn't match, and you go to the state, the one that we're looking at is the only one we've got is from the driver's license, and I'm a good example of that because on official stuff where I'm Louis B. Treadwell second, I've got that one, and if I'm just signing in like I did today, I start with Meade, and because nobody knows me as Louis, and it's very confusing.
Yeah, we do send out letters. If their signature does get rejected at the canvas, I do send out letters notifying people, and they have steps on how they can fix it. So we do communicate afterwards saying, hey, it didn't count for this reason. This is how you can
What I
fix
was
it.
concerned about with the thing that the elections office told me about microfiche is, have you been reading the Department of Justice, the stories about justice looking at this election?
Not all of them.
So let me just tell you the abbreviated political story. The state of Alaska was on the Justice Department watch list to the point where, and this might have been the case when you were Lieutenant Governor Lauren, but when I was Lieutenant Governor, we had it. I could not change even a ballot envelope without getting Justice Department approval. They were running my elections, okay? Several states sued in the Supreme Court, and the Justice Department was told to stand down. I happened to be standing in front of the Supreme Court that day, and I posted on Facebook a thumbs up because we had just won the thing. Mark Begich pummeled me for being unsupportive of Justice Department oversight to assure free elections. The Native American Rights Fund, which had settled with my predecessor, Sean Parnell, for like $3 million for lack of language assistance in certain villages, then sued me. And somehow, just somehow, Mark Begich, who was a senator when I was a candidate for Senate, had all that information and was issuing a press release about 2 seconds after they sued me. So it was a very politically coordinated event. Then Byron Lott became lieutenant governor. He settled with them and gave him another $2 or $3 million to figure out ways to sue us again. It is the agenda of one side to do two things. One is to bring in the Justice Department to take away state and local control of elections. And two, it's the agenda to always do that at a time that a lieutenant governor is running for a federal office, which is why there have been about 3 or 4 stories, well, because Nancy's running for Congress, about this going on. Frankly, this situation is ripe for them to use this as an example of the state letting an election happen in a way that disenfranchises voters. My biggest problem with the NARF folks, they come to me and said, yes, we settled 2 years ago for these 10 villages, but we really think you ought to do more language in these villages. We would have done it. Instead, they had to sue us, and the reason for suing us was not to protect those villages. The reason, because they'd already said they didn't need those villages, the reason to do that was to get another multi-million-dollar settlement from the state. And to issue the press releases that they did at the time. And I had Native leaders who I very much respect, like Gail Schubert, come to me and saying, why are you disenfranchising Native voters? It's, Gail, tell me what you want me to do. We'll do it. Well, NARF says you should have done this. And it's a weird situation. But the fact is that if Nancy and Carol haven't done this, you're a smart lawyer, I'm telling you, pay attention to it, okay? Because it can affect you. And some of your practices may end up throwing the state into that tar baby. And the problem is, frankly, if there really is somebody denying somebody the right to vote, I'm all for it. Come in with a ton of bricks, okay? But instead, it made it very, very hard to run elections. I'll give you an example. We had a polling place where the roof collapsed in a snowstorm 3 days before the election. We had to go by an emergency to get federal permission to change the ballot, the voting place. So I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I'm just telling you that this is a situation that could ultimately change the state's position again with the Justice Department, or could invalidate one of your elections, and that's what you don't want to have happen. That's all I'm saying.
So, I hear what you're saying, and I think our situation is a little different from the story you just told, because we do offer multiple avenues for people to cure. We do alert them after the fact that their signature didn't match, and they would have received communication from us before. So there's a lot of communication to the voters about, hey, this is missing, please fix it. And we do, as I mentioned, we do send letters after 3 days after we get that ballot and run it through our system, they have up until the hour before you meet for the public session of Canvas to cure their ballot. So they have multiple days
They
to
can
do
actually
so.
come at the
And they can
meeting,
come to
yeah.
the public session to cure.
And Bill,
So,
I understand you're doing that, but just look at the faults in that system, okay? Fault number one is
In the first place.
is that it happened in the first place. Fault number two is that the notification to cure takes longer than it should in today's society with emails and texts and your staff capability.
And we are part of the database. We are able to capture, enter email addresses and phone numbers. So that is one of the things that we're building to move forward. So if, say, in the April election, they provided an email address or a phone number, but they didn't for the runoff, if it's the same and hasn't changed in that, 6 weeks, we can go back to our database and contact the voter that way. So we are trying to capture that information so that we can reach out to them sooner.
Right.
So
Well-
we are trying to do that.
Well, just know that when an election is challenged, my name was in one Supreme Court opinion in 1978 because I had the temerity to suggest to Lowell Thomas that, if you accepted these ballots without witnesses in fishing communities for Jay Hammond, why did you throw out the ballots on the North Slope in communities that supported for Governor Hickle? So we went and opened them, and then when we sued about the different standard, the Supreme Court taught me a word that I didn't know, because I went to law school, called estoppel, and said we actually would have ruled in Hickle's favor on this if they hadn't sought a cure. But inconsistencies will lead you to a problem. Not having good accounting will lead you to a problem, and something like this where it's through the voter's non-fault. I mean, when you sign up to register to vote, that's all you've told the voter they have to do, and anything else that disqualifies them, in my mind, is vulnerable. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why we're having this conversation, to figure out other ways we can capture these people and get them to cure or get their
and we are
get their
working to
yeah.
Yeah, if you run these two lists and figure out how many ministerial, that would make me feel more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think if
But I would also have a conversation with Carol on what's in the microfiche that hasn't been digitized.
okay, yeah,
That affects.
I've actually had my first legit conversation with her when we were both in Florida for a cybersecurity conference. So I think now that we have had our face and names put together, I think there's a greater opportunity for communication and partnership when it comes to how the muni and state work. And that's all I'm for in this role. Like, I've starting better communications with the post office so that, there are no issues when it comes to any ballots being delivered or received back. So having a better relationship with the post office, having a better relationship with the state, I think will all help with this as well. And I am more than happy to start that conversation with Carol.
But if that would be helpful at all, let me know.
Okay, I will.
Okay, I have a question, kind of related to that. You said you changed so that you're leaving messages now when you call.
Yep. So we're going to be leaving messages for everyone. We already were leaving messages, but we will for everyone.
Did you also change so that your caller ID is going to show on their phone?
I was hoping someone to rig that up. So I did look into that, and unfortunately, that is something that the municipality cannot do. I probably should have made let me go make a couple copies of this email that I have from IT. But essentially, it's nothing that we can do on our end. It would have to be, according to IT, it would have to be something that the voters' carriers do. So it would have to be like AT&T, GCI, Verizon. They would have to make the change on their end for our caller ID to come through as MOA elections,
I can
which
make
is
a copy if you want to keep talking.
which is what I was hoping to do, because I do like that idea. I, am much personally, I would be much more apt to pick up a phone call if I know who's calling. So I really took that idea to heart and I wanted to run with it, but apparently we can't.
I don't understand that. When I call, I don't have a choice whether, well, I can do color.
Yeah. So I think it's on the carrier side. So the people who run the carrier have to do it, is my understanding of what I heard from IT. And I have an explanation in an email, and Liz is making some copies for you. Because it was something I immediately looked into because I really did like that idea. And I thought it was, I don't know why we didn't do it in the first place. And it just makes total sense.
So how many carriers are there that we'd have to work with?
What? There's AT&T, GCI, Verizon,
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile. I don't know if any of the smaller carriers are operating in this place. Like the one, Cricket, I think is one.
Less than a dozen.
Yeah, and I don't know what it would take. I don't know if that would be a conversation that would have to be with their like national headquarters or what.
So, does the National Election Commission still exist?
It's the Elections Assistance Commission.
Right. I used to know the guys on there. One of them was a law partner who would practice a bunch in Alaska. Greg Chapados, who is the lead at GCI, is very politically attuned because he was Ted Stevens' chief of staff for 8 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I think if you send a note to him just saying, hey, this is something where, we need to get a hold of voters to secure their ballot. We threw out 1%. Many elections turn on less than 1%. Greg, is there any way you can help us? I'll give you his email. Copy me, and I would start with them. The other is Verizon. I mean, they are a large local carrier.
Mm-hmm.
The other is Verizon and AT&T. You used to have pretty visible people in the state. They don't any longer, but I run into the Verizon national lobbyists for state issues fairly often. But let's just start with Greg because he understands politics, and he might be able to tell us what it is. And if he says it's impossible because the home location the HLR, the home location register of your cell number, which tells the local cell system where you are when your airplane lands in Chicago, doesn't carry the other information that we would send or what. I don't know what it is. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to send me an email with his email, I will reach out and see if that is even something that we can do. Because like I said, I did like this idea. I was hoping it would be something super easy to change. But it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. But I am more than happy to start with GCI because they are a local carrier and go from there.
This email, when you read it, it says you can't change the name of the display when calling outside the Muni. So calls to Anchorage numbers it would show, right?
No, he means like
Outside
the government.
Yeah. So I've called my personal phone several times from different phones in this, and it comes up with the same number. It comes up with 907-343-4310. That's the number that always shows up.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've tried multiple phones just to make sure that's the case. I mean, it could come up with something else for other people, but that's what I have received on my phone.
That sounds like an office phone. 343.
Yeah, that's our
Yeah,
phone.
That's the vote.
That's our line.
The hotline that we would.
So
be calling
I would
from.
call
So
my
that's
phone.
That's not a personal cell phone?
This is my personal cell phone.
No, he's saying he's called from
Yeah.
the voter
If I-
hotline, which is what
I
we would
see.
be
Yeah,
calling. the
because
voters with.
we typically call voters over here if they need to cure. So I called on both of these phones. I've even called on my office phone over there and these phones
Yeah.
back here where our call centers sit. So just to make sure they all came in as the same number, and they all do. But yeah, I'm more than happy to send an email to GCI to see if this is something that they can do. And if it is, then that should mean that other carriers can. The issue there is, who do I talk to?
Yeah, but even if a few of them do,
Mhm.
it would
Yeah, it would
at
be.
least improve.
Yeah, and I think having GCI be the starting point, because it is a local carrier, and by local I mean local to Alaska, I think that's a big stepping point. I mean, I don't have GCI, but I mean, it's still, helpful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that we should be
About
discussing
this?
today?
Yeah, we are just talking about curing today.
Yeah.
What else on your list is curable at this point, besides the signature? Somebody who's, do you call somebody who sent last month's ballot rather than this month's ballot? We had a number of people who would send in last year's ballot.
We don't call them. Do they get letters?
Yes.
If we have their ballots, they get letters. So
Do we give them an opportunity to cure by bringing in this year's ballot or come vote today's ballot?
I mean, if it's postmarked after the fact, or
No, I mean, the person who has a desk that looks like my mother's, that all the election things are stuck in one cubby, and they decide to vote, and they use the envelope from last year's election where they didn't vote.
So
I mean, there were actually more of those.
right. So when they come in and they're the previous elections, we do open it up to make sure that it's last year's ballot. And if it's the current election, we actually will make that election's envelope for them, so it does get counted. So we do open it up and we do double check, because that has happened where they've used a previous election's envelope, but it's the current ballot, and we do make a current envelope for them, so it does count.
There were 50 of those in the runoff.
yep, and we've opened those. When we handed them to you, they were open, and we made sure that they were not the runoff ballots.
Right.
And that always happens. We always receive, the election previous or even the year previous.
We're still getting 2019.
So yeah. So it's we recognize it, and that's why we do open them. And if they are the current election, we create a ballot.
How many of them went this fast? She got my head off. Remember that?
So
And people even send in a ballot in a regular envelope too, not even an election one. And we will still open those to ensure that, it is a ballot.
or if they stick just their ballot in a Dropbox, but they've signed it and put their name, I'll make an envelope for them and we'll count it that way.
Yep.
So
Weirdly, okay, but there was some, all right.
it's the ones where there's no identifying information. I have no idea who they are.
In terms of your list of the biggest reasons not to cure, obviously the signatures is the biggest.
Yes.
What else?
The other one I think would be postmarked after Election Day. And that one, unfortunately, we can't do anything about. In our messaging, we always give the 3 options to return, which is vote at an ABC, drop at one of our boxes, or go to the post office. And if we talk about the post office, we always tell people if they're going to be there, the day before or even on Election Day, to make sure they bring their ballot in person, to have the person behind the desk hand cancel it and make sure it was postmarked for Election Day. Unfortunately, there's, those individuals do get letters after the fact if they do return their ballot after Election Day, saying that they weren't counted because it was postmarked after. But we are always, in every single communication that we send out to voters, or if we're talking to the media, or even in the new videos that I created this year for social media, was always telling people to ensure that they go into the post office if they're waiting last minute to hand cancel and get it postmarked.
The other thing is that they send them in the regular envelope, that whatever that name is. There were 33 of them in the regular election,
Which of these?
where they send them in their own envelope. So you're unable to identify the voter, so you don't count the vote.
Yeah, if we have no identifying information, we can't count them
Yeah.
because we can't attribute that to a voter.
Yeah. So if
How do
they,
we fix that?
that's
I don't think we can.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we provide them all the information possible and how to actually vote. So it's the people, I would assume what's happening is it's the people that don't trust the system. But that's also why we have vote centers for people who don't want to participate in vote by mail to go vote in person. And those are open, the main ones are open 7 days before the election. So there's plenty of time to go vote in person.
So much of this comes down to an advertising program that would educate the voting public.
And that's what we do.
But it's going to have to be something far, far more gut punch. Your vote doesn't count unless.
And
Your vote will not count.
that's what we do. Because I'm the one doing the advertising.
Okay.
And I try to make that point come across to every single voter because I want every single voter who can vote to vote, and I want their vote to count. So I make it extremely clear that votes will not count if they're not in at a specific time. So if it's not into us, well, if they're voting in person, if they're not in line before 8 o'clock, and if they're there after 8, their vote's not going to count. If they're at a drop box after 8 o'clock, if they're not in line, that vote's not going to count. They need to be there.
Okay, but
Mhm.
I think you don't need to talk about advertising.
Yeah, so it's, I harp on those points a lot, especially as we get closer and we're still waiting for people to vote. And then same with the mail. I always say that it has to be postmarked by election day for it to count. We do.
Real quick,
Mm-hmm.
can we get a motion to extend?
Sure. I didn't know that we were taking votes today, but is there any objection to extending, how much time do you think? 15 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
15 minutes? Without objection.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Just in case.
Yeah, because it is technically still a meeting. It's just
Yeah, because people can still tune in. I don't think anyone's there, but yeah. So I really try to make it completely apparent and explicit to voters that there are certain deadlines they have to meet in order for their vote to count, and that's when they're in line voting in person, in line at a drop box, and mail. Because when we go to a drop box, if there's a line of cars, we have one of our workers stand by that last car that showed up by 8 o'clock with a sign saying this is the last car. And same with the polling location.
Al,
It's like the state. We cannot accept a vote after 8 o'clock.
is there any way you could put somebody at, or do a polling location at the post office,
That would be a lot of polling locations.
or just that day, just that evening?
I don't think it would be possible. If we had, so the reason I say that is because we would need a lot more workers to do that. And we already had issues this past year filling our ranks with workers. There's a lot of safety concerns now when it comes to elections, unfortunately, and a lot of our workers are elderly folks who are retired, who, by the kindness of their heart, help us with these. They get paid, and we pay them well. But still, it's hard to get workers nowadays. It shouldn't be. Elections should be boring, but they're not. So, we had to have conversations this year about white powder substances coming in our envelopes. There's conversations about doxing and things like that happening in the lower 48 that, you need to be prepared for just in case. But some of these issues do make it hard to find people. So, but I hear you on that point. It's a good suggestion, but I don't know if it's doable with our current pool of workers.
Who do you deal with at the post office right now?
So I finally have a point person. Her name's Melissa, and I've been working with her lately. So she's going to be the one that I'm working with to figure out other post office things.
So, I don't know who the current person is, but I guess I would tell you that politically, it has usually been somebody who's very well wired. I'm not going to say close or put in there by the congressional delegation, but I mean, just again, in my 50 years in Alaska, there was one guy who had it for a long time, whose wife was very active in elections and so forth. And so you could always get a conversation with him. The person who oversees Anchorage has a son who I am in business with and talk to a couple times a month. But I think it makes sense. Again, don't let anybody play the role of levels with you. You're the head of elections for the largest constituency in the state, and if you need to go see the top dog, go see the top dog.
Yeah, and we did have a conversation. What was his name? His name is it Tim? Jim? I have it written down.
Yeah,
but
he's
we
the
did.
district manager. For
We
all
did
of
have a
Alaska.
conversation with him and Melissa a few weeks ago, and like I said, I'm really hoping to start a better partnership with the post office, so that if there are any issues that do arise, we can get to the bottom of them quickly. We did have a couple ballots come back to us after the election that had some weird labels on it that we'd never seen before. So we're going to the post office, and they're looking into it now to figure out why some of the ballots didn't return. We had one person during the regular election who was in Sweden. She sent her ballot in, but then the ballot got sent back to her, saying it was undeliverable to us, which is not correct because our address has not changed. So we're getting to the bottom of that. And that's why I wanted to find the point person, because I did send an email during the regular and nobody got back to me. So that's why I found a point person. And same with this election. We had a couple come in that had another strange label on it that we're also trying to get to bottom to figure out why these have, these either undeliverable labels, even though all the mailing addresses are correct, or what's going on. It could be human error at the post office. It could be something else. Who knows? That's why they're looking into it.
Okay, the other thing that we were going to look into was making phone calls in the evening,
So,
just business hours, to try to capture.
so that suggestion I don't really have an appetite for, to be quite honest, because we already are asking our workers to work long hours as it is.
I'm not talking about lengthening a worker's workday. I'm talking about for the week, making the workday different 8 hours.
Well, during the election, we can't make it a different 8 hours because we have to stick to our current work schedule due to observer needs, campaign needs, and if we were to stay after, it would have to be, a press release would have to go out. So,
Press release that you're going to call
Mhm.
to.
because the issue that we have is if we are in this place anytime after 5:30 or so, we start getting a lot of complaints, and a lot of people are like, what is going on? This place is monitored 24/7 on YouTube. I'm not saying it's not doable, but there's a lot of logistics that come with it, and it would be increasing some of our staff hours. And that goes back again to the lack of election workers in the pool right now.
Can the League of Women Voters, as an example, or some nonpartisan group or even a campaign, get the list of the uncured?
They already do. Every day I send that out to anyone who requests. Typically it is the campaigns, other interested people, observers, media outlets. So we do have that data available, and I do send it out.
You report to the clerk, who reports to the assembly, right? Not to the mayor. So the mayor's new city manager was head of government and community affairs at GCI until this job, and she can also help you find the right person.
Okay.
Just figure out what are the technical issues.
Yep.
She knows them all.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Not on this subject, but 2 questions. First of all, why are we meeting so rarely? We were going to do this, I thought, soon after the last meeting. That's been 3 months ago.
Well, I would say the answer is it's up to us
Okay.
to decide when we meet. I believe staff comes to us with suggestions for time, and we typically respond favorably. We're in this together.
And I think it's only required to meet twice. Correct? That's for reorg and then for canvas purposes.
Yeah.
So maybe 3 times if there's a runoff.
Yeah, so those are the required, but we could, and you as a member could request that and say, I'd like to meet, and this is
Fine, I'd
what.
like to meet monthly until we get some of these changes made.
I can say it's going to take a little bit more time than a monthly, but I do want to meet again. And I have a couple proposed times that I would like to throw in front of you guys to see if it's something that you can meet. Because we also are going to need to talk about Title 28 changes in the future as well that are currently being worked on.
Okay.
So, because there is a lot of stuff that goes on in the summer months that we're doing behind the scenes. So that's why I don't think monthly would be great, but we can meet monthly. I'm just not sure there would be any updates on a monthly basis. But I'm looking at meeting next month
Okay.
to, if there's any title changes that need to be done for what we've talked about today, and title changes that need to be done regardless.
Okay, well, for example, sorry if anybody's running out of time, but I've discovered recently that we have a number of refugees, that, especially from Russia and Ukraine, that have come to Alaska. They've been here for over a year. They've applied for their PFD checks, and all of a sudden they're registered to vote. They don't want to vote because they want to gain citizenship here, and they don't want to be felons that have voted. But there are, the figure I heard was well over 1,000 people who are non-citizens who are now registered to vote, and they're afraid somebody might accidentally vote and put themselves in jeopardy of ever being.
That's a state.
I was going to say, we can't do anything about that. That's
I
the
know,
that's
but
the state.
There's going to be a change at the state level, but it needs to be instituted by someplace, by someone. Can we investigate and see what needs to be done at the state level and make the suggestion? Like we said, we are the largest voting population in the state. Why can't we determine what the challenge is, how to fix it, and then bring it to the state?
I'm not understanding how they
If you're
become
a
a
non-citizen
registered
and you vote,
voter.
the PFD registration.
Well, yeah, you apply, then one of the questions is are you a citizen of
And
the
they
United
write
States?
no, and they're still getting registered to vote.
Well, there's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have the authority to do that.
No. Trust me, there's things that I would like to make happen, but I don't know if we can just because of that's not our job. We are not the state.
Yeah.
We are totally separate. We have no say over the PFD or anything like that.
No. There are some cities in America that have decided that you don't have to be a citizen to vote in their municipal elections. There are some cities that have passed laws that say you have to be. I don't know what our law says. What does our law say?
I don't think that's in our law.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that in Title 28, and that's where it would be.
And for the municipality, you have to register with the state, so it's the state requirements drive the municipalities. We have nothing to, we can't control, we don't do anything with voter registration. That is all with the state, and the state has their own statutes that they follow. There's nothing in our code that says these are our voting
I
statutes.
get that. But we could institute starting a process that would address this. We are a loud voice if we choose to use it.
So I'll give you a good example, and this is actually a true story. You've probably heard the story. Anchorage had a very fine policeman who is an immigrant from Mexico who voted in many elections. municipal and state elections. It was discovered that he was that he was not a citizen when his brother, whose passport he used, or cousin, tried to come into the country, and they said, "No, you're already in the country." So this guy was, the Justice Department came down all over him. He was a model citizen, a model non-citizen. He had been a great cop, and I believe he was deported. But the Justice Department did not want to charge him with this, maybe for the reason that you've mentioned. But the U.S. attorney who was appointed by Barack Obama told me that she was told by Central Justice that she could not include the violation of our state laws that I was administering. And they didn't even talk to me before they made this decision in their overall settlement of this guy. And when we've looked at what non-citizens are voting in Alaska, there was an issue up in Barrow where somebody gave the wrong advice. Oh yeah, you can vote in a local election, you live here. The state had to make a decision whether or not we did that. What politically colors it is because people like President Trump will say, there are even, non-citizens are voting here. And weirdly enough, the Democratic Justice Department doesn't want to charge anybody with it because then it would add statistics and it would add credibility. At least it seems that way. That's a conspiracy theory on my part. But at any rate, I think you have the authority. If you know for a fact that somebody is a non-citizen, you have the authority to deny them their vote. And I think that's a question for the rest of attorneys.
If I can interject, we extended for 15 minutes,
I'm
which was
ready
fine.
to go, but this is an issue.
But if we want to continue, should we extend for another 15? Okay. I have another engagement, but I'm okay to miss a portion of it. Okay, no objection? Okay, we're extended till noon.
State elections. Okay, so I have the voter qualifications up here, and what our code says, and this is 2830010, is to vote in a municipal election, a person must be a qualified voter with the state, a resident of the municipality for 30 days immediately preceding the election, and registered to vote in state elections at a resident address within the municipality at least 30 days before the municipal election at which the person seeks to vote. And then in order to cast a valid vote for a candidate or a ballot measure relating to a specific local election, district, or service area, that voter shall be registered 30 days before the municipal election at the resident address within the boundaries of that district or service area. So that's talking about your assembly races and your LRSA races. But those 3 points, the person has to be a qualified voter with the state in order for them to vote in our election. And they have to be in the muni 30 days. So that's why a lot of our question ballots come into play. And that's why you guys refuse to count a lot of those, because those people were not registered in time or they are registered somewhere else. So this issue about people coming in from another area, another country to vote, that I believe would have to be addressed at the state level because they have to be a qualified voter. And if they're in this case, if they are signing up with the PFD, if they're hitting no, I am not a citizen, that should not automatically register in the votes.
But we can follow up.
We can follow up, but that's a state issue. But I'm more than happy to follow up on that as well. If I have, before I do that, I'm going to need proof that that's actually happening.
Okay.
I need proof. So, but okay. So, a couple of meeting dates that I'm hoping work for your schedule would be Wednesday, September 25th from 10:30 to 11:30. Or any time that morning, I think works.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a granddaughter's birthday and haven't heard yet, but might be a little mini party.
In the day or in the evening?
Probably in the evening. No, I just say that.
So you're saying
in jest.
same as today, 10:30?
Yeah.
I think if we do it early enough in the
Yeah.
morning.
And I
it'll
think,
be fine.
I don't think there's anything on the calendar that day other than what used to be called Ethics and Election Committee, but that's at noon. And I'm not sure if there will be anything on the agenda for election. Now it's what, Quality Municipal
Government,
Services and Ethics and Election. So it's a bigger committee now. So,
I can do it.
okay.
The 25th.
What about you, Mead?
Plan to be in the state that week. I've got at least one set of visitors coming in, but I think I'll be able to work around that.
Okay, great. So I'll have Amy send out an email about that, and we'll also reach out to Lisa to see if she can make that.
The 25th.
Yep, the 25th, and that will be a conversation about Title 28 changes.
And at 10:30.
Yes, and that will be here. All right.
Any chance within the week before that, you can send out specifics on what we might talk about, or are we just?
Yeah, I should be able to do that.
That would help.
Yeah. Because I'll look into code to see if there's anything that we need to change for any of these suggestions moving forward. And I already have stuff in the works for Title 28 now.
And you'll call GCI all.
I don't know. I'll reach out. I don't think that'll be a title change, so that we won't have to address it then. But I will, as soon as I get that email from Mead, I will reach out.
Yeah, I sent it to you already. So,
Yep.
caller ID. Yeah, is it a cell phone issue or a?
It sound-
dial from a switchboard here, or from a network here, and it just how does it come over to your phone?
So it sounds to me that the carrier that I have, so AT&T, would have to change something on their end. So if I call from one of these phones here, it comes in as MOA elections or whatever. So I think, who do we have? We have Alaska Communications or whatever, I
Yeah.
think.
So I have GCI, and it just comes up with the actual phone number. It doesn't have a name attached
Yeah.
to it.
So I don't think going to, at least from my understanding of talking to this IT individual over the phone and having him write this up to me so I could provide this, I don't think even talking to our provider here would change it. I think it has to be the other companies that we as voters have.
Yeah, I know that there's people who you can spoof a number. When I say spoof, I mean let's suppose that you were doing a marketing campaign in Arizona. You can do something to your outgoing phone to make it look like it's an Arizona local number.
Typically, I think you'd have to have a SIM card with that.
Typically,
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
But-
good luck.
Yeah.
If you have any problems, let us know.
Okay.
I think that first off, on calling folks at night, and I will tell you this: if you call my home number, I check the answering machine about once a month because the message on the home number says "Call my cell. Here's my cell number."
Yeah.
All right, it's there basically so that you can call 911 if the cell phone battery is done.
Yeah.
At this point, but it would seem to me that figuring out something, William, that the cost difference between holding an election in person and holding an election by mail was supposed to be so significant that that was one of your reasons to do it. The second was broader voter participation. If curing means that you need to have somebody on flex time working the 10 days after the election to call, cure at night, or get a set of volunteers or get a set of your observers to do that in a coordinated fashion or whatever, that's worth going and asking for the extra overtime on that if you can. That's all I'm saying.
So it's not the overtime thing. It's because I can approve overtime during the election.
Sure.
That's no issue, and I do it all the time for my workers. But the issue is, again, asking older people, I hate to put it that way, but older folks to stay later into the evenings when they only sign up for a day of work. And sometimes a day of work is only a few hours a day.
Well, I guess all I'm saying is for the number that you talked about, five people working, till 8 o'clock, 3 hours extra. We're allowed to come in 3 hours later or something like that.
And again, it's also going to be logistics because we have to abide by code and we have to notify the public that we're going to be here. Campaigns will need to be notified. Otherwise, they will be like, why is there somebody here in the election center? Like, what is going on? What ballots are they tampering with? Things like that. So it's a lot of public perception as well. But
You have to do it from here.
Yes. Because then I also have to be here. So I would also be working from, and I'm fine with doing it, but I would be working 8 to 8 every single day because I run this. And again, I'm fine with working those long hours because I want people's votes to count. But there's got to be other ways than calling. I know calling it in evenings from previous work works sometimes. It's changed a lot since I've done that type of stuff. But I'm
on the board of a company that unfortunately has to collect from people who don't pay their bills, and that staff works in the evening, and it's far more effective.
And again, campaigns do have the information, so they should, if they're campaigning correctly, should be also reaching out to those people. They're arguably working in evenings because they know that evenings are the best time to reach voters. So maybe it's we can't have that conversation with them because we are nonpartisan and we have nothing to do with campaigns. But maybe that's a conversation that future campaigns need to have and how to reach out to those people to get them to cure. But we can look into options. I'm not saying no to everything because I do want to see these numbers decline even more than they have. So,
Mr. Chairman, I move for adjournment.